Hi, I'm Adam Porter. I recently made a video about table presence in board game design, and this was inspired by my own experiences of creating the game Pikoko, which I think was a game that had great table presence. But in my recent video, I didn't pass judgment on any of the games that I mentioned. I didn't say whether I liked them or not, and that was mentioned in the comments on that video, that people would have liked to know, but are these games any fun? So that's what I'm going to try and do in this video, is go through 50 different games and talk about whether I personally found them fun or not. And I'm going to be ranking them according to that. So you can take it as a given that these games have amazing table presence, by which I mean people are going to glance across the room and go, what is that person playing? And I want to play. All these games fulfill that criteria, but I'm going to be ranking them according to how fun they are for me. Which means there are going to be some in there which I know are extremely popular games that I personally don't really like. And there are going to be others which really aren't popular games, that are games that nobody really seems to know about, but I particularly enjoy. So this is by no means an authoritative list, it's my personal taste. And there's a couple of rules that I'm going to put on here. So one is, I'm not including any games just purely on the basis of artwork alone. So there'll be no Dixit, no Tokaido, no Oceans, these games with amazing artwork and graphic design. They don't fulfill my central criteria of having one physical component, three-dimensional component that really stands out. And the other rule is, I'm not allowing games onto the list purely on the basis of miniatures, with a couple of minor exceptions, and I think you'll understand why the exceptions are there, I hope. Maybe I'm being a little bit loose with that rule, but there are so many games out there with fantastic miniatures that could make a whole list in itself, and also I don't play that many heavy sort of miniatures games. So let's kick off with the game Manhattan, which is an old Spiel des Jahres winner. It's had a more recent edition by Foxmind, but it's not a game that gets talked about hugely, although really it is on a level of things like Ticket to Ride in terms of accessibility, and it can be a little bit mean, okay? It's an area control game, so you can get in each other's way, and it can lead to a little bit of bad feeling. Maybe that's why it's not quite so renowned as Ticket to Ride and others from that Spiel des Jahres sort of stable. But Manhattan, yeah, you're building these skyscrapers with these plastic pieces. In the most recent edition from Foxmind, they are very colourful, translucent pieces, which means it all looks very tropical and not particularly like New York City. But nonetheless, I still prefer that version to what we had before. It looks beautiful, it looks like a load of sweets on the board, and it's a really fun game. I'm calling this one A tier, okay? Really good game. Right, number 2 on my list then. These are in no particular order. This one is Takenoko. So in this one, we're building out a garden, and we've got a little panda and a little gardener. No one owns those pieces, but all players can control both of them. And you're trying to fulfill objectives that you have on cards in your hand, a bit like in Ticket to Ride. So you might be trying to get the panda to eat certain colours of bamboo, or trying to get the gardener to grow different levels of different colours of bamboo. It's really fun. It's simple, but it's probably family weight plus. Yeah, you probably want to have a few other board games under your belt before you start playing Takenoko. Really satisfying and very, very beautiful on the table. So next on the list is Pylos. Pylos is an old wooden game from Gigamic. It's their modern classics range. So you've got these little wooden balls and you're stacking them up to create a pyramid. Very sort of strategic, thinky sort of game. Takes a lot of brain power to work out what you're going to do. I haven't quite got my head totally around it, and it's not my favourite from the range of games here, although it is one of the most beautiful in that range. So Pylos, I'm calling that one a B tier. B tier for Pylos. Number 4 on the list is Junkart. So Junkart is a stacking game. You've got all sorts of different wooden shapes of different pieces, all shaped differently, all different colours, and you're stacking them up. The rules keep changing throughout the game, so you've got, or not throughout the game, but different rounds of the game. You have different rule sets to play with these blocks. Essentially, you're playing with building blocks and just hoping that the other player's towers fall before yours do, which is always really, really satisfying. It's one of my favourite mechanisms in a game, is stacking pieces. So Junkart comes in this lovely big wooden box, which really adds to the appeal. And it's one of those games where people are always going to be getting out their camera and taking photographs of what they've built. You know, stacking games have table presence like nothing else. So Junkart, really good game, lots of variety in that box. I'm calling it A tier. Okay, next on the list then is Flick 'em Up, which is from the same publisher as Junkart. And like Junkart, Flick 'em Up comes in 2 versions. You can have the plastic version, which is smaller and cheaper, or you can have the big wooden version. I've got the big wooden version, and you can basically build this Wild West sort of playground on your tabletop. With the expansions, you can bring in Native Americans, and they're shooting arrows, and horses, riding on horses, and you're going in and out of the bank, robbing the bank, or going in the, the sheriff's building, or it's a fantastic, really thematic game with lots and lots of scenarios. You can try all sorts of different things out with Flick 'em Up. Bit bulky, there's a lot going on, and it can be a bit intimidating once you've got all that stuff. I always think, oh, if I've got to set all this up and then remember all the rules for all the different pieces. But nonetheless, fantastic game, Flick 'em Up. I'm calling it A tier. Okay, next on the list, number 6. This is one that I don't own, and it's Cthulhu Wars. And this is one of the ones that I said was an exception, because this is on here because of the miniatures. And the reason I'm making an exception for it is because these miniatures are not miniature, okay? They're huge, and they're everywhere. The table is just full of these massive monsters, these Cthulhu monsters. Now, Cthulhu is not really a theme that connects with me. I've never found it particularly interesting. I've never read any of it. I've played a few of the games and not generally enjoyed them very much. Cthulhu Wars I wouldn't normally play, but I played it at a convention with lots of strangers, and I actually had a really nice time playing it. I really enjoyed it. It was big, it was complicated. I don't really want to play it again, but nonetheless, it impressed me enough that I managed to get through the game, enjoy it, engage with it when I really wasn't expecting to. But it does look amazing, Cthulhu Wars, with those massive, weird toys, essentially, that are all laid out on the table. So I'm calling this one a B tier. Okay, B tier for Cthulhu Wars. Number 7 is Bunny Kingdom, and this is going to be our first S tier game, okay? I love Bunny Kingdom. It's one of my favourite games of all time. So here it's a pick and pass card game where you take a card, you pass the others on. The cards that you take have grid references, and you're placing bunnies out onto the board, trying to occupy the castles in order to score points and build up areas, little fiefs they're called, but little communities of bunnies, little kingdoms. Fantastic game, Bunny Kingdom, and it just looks so cute. Those plastic pieces are amazing. Number 8 on the list is River Dragons. Now, River Dragons was very, very popular, I don't know, probably about 10 years ago. You could buy a giant version of it, a bit like you could with Takenoko, a big wooden box full of it. Very, very beautiful. Laying out sort of bridges between stones so that your pieces can move across this river. But it's a programming game. So you lay out your plans before you start taking your turn, and then other players are going to mess up those turns with their plans, their program that they've laid out. I don't like that sort of game. I find that one of the most frustrating game mechanisms. I've talked about this before. So River Dragons didn't work for me. I played it a number of times and it was really popular. People really loved it. So, I'm obviously the exception there, but not for me. For me, River Dragons is a D tier game, even though it's beautiful. Number 9 on the list, Gezanke Auf Der Planke, which I've talked about recently in a review. This is a Zoc Verlag game. Zoc Verlag is one of my favourite publishers. This one has a sort of rocking pirate ship, and you're moving the pirates around to try and get the planks to tip over and knock your opponents out into the sea. It's a decent little family game. The rule set isn't perfect, I don't think. It's not one of Zoc's best, but it's by no means a bad game. I would call this one I'm going to call it a C tier, but it's a high C. It's a high, no pun intended. Okay, right, number 10, Tobago. Okay, Tobago is another Zoc Verlag game, and this is one of their best. Okay, it's one of their most popular. It's stuck around for years and years. You could argue that I'm putting this on here because of miniatures, but these aren't miniatures in the form of little sculptures. They're little palm trees and statues and little wooden cars that drive around this island, and you're looking for treasure. You're playing out cards which say the treasure is within a couple of spaces of a tree, or it's not within 2 spaces of the ocean, or it's contained within the forest, and so you're gradually whittling down where that treasure can be and then racing to get there before the other players. It's a really fun game and very, very beautiful when it's laid out on the table. So that one I'm calling A tier for Tobago. Right, Medina, number 11. Medina, I just love the cityscape that you create in Medina. I think games have been trying to do this so much. Lots of games have tried to do it, to create a sort of 3-dimensional cityscape on the table. And I think Medina does it better than almost any other game. So you've got these different wooden shapes that represent the different buildings. You lay them out. You're trying to score different sets and lay out your sort of citizens of this city. It's been a while since I've played it, so I can't get into the mechanisms too much more detail than that. But it's really fun. And it's very, very beautiful. So Medina, I'm calling an A tier game. Okay, next up on the list is Everdell, and this is another S tier. Okay, I love Everdell. Yes, the artwork is a huge part of it. The artwork is very, very beautiful, but it's also got all those lovely resource pieces and then that amazing three-dimensional tree, which the cards sit on top of. And it's a useless tree. It doesn't really serve any real purpose apart from to catch the eye. And actually, it gets in the way if you're playing with more than, say, 3 players. But I've not really played it much with higher player counts. I tend to play this as a 2-player game, sometimes at 3. Probably wouldn't go much higher than that, so the tree doesn't bother me at all. In fact, I quite like it. So very eye-catching, the game Everdell, and it's a fantastic worker placement, resource management game. Okay, number 13 is Quarto. So this is another game from the same range, the Modern Classics range, the same range as Pylos. And Quarto, I think, is the best game in that range. This is essentially, you're connecting up 4 pieces, and you might be connecting 4 of the same colour, or 4 pieces that are all round, or 4 pieces that are all square, or maybe 4 that are solid, or 4 that are hollow, or 4 that are tall, or 4 that are short. And no one owns any of these pieces. On your turn, you play the piece that your opponent chooses for you. And just that twist is just amazing. It's a really clever, really simple game and very, very satisfying. And it looks so sort of stylish, a bit like Pylos. It's one of those games that you might leave out on a tabletop, a coffee table, and it all looks very sophisticated and sleek. It's just a really nice object to own. But it's an S tier game, okay? It's fantastic, Quarto. Really, really good quality game. Number 14, Camel Up. So Camel Up, I'm going to call A tier. Okay, Camel Up is another Spiel des Jahres winner. You can see the Spiel des Jahres do tend to like these table presence games with these physical gimmicks, I suppose, in the centre of them. And I don't say that as a pejorative. I love the gimmick in Camel Up. So Camel Up has this central pyramid dice shaker that's unnecessary, but you essentially shake it up and then you release dice from this pyramid, and you've got the camels that stack on top of each other. They're racing around the track, and if the camels move, then they take everything that's on top of them with them, and you're betting on which camels are going to win the race. It's a really fun, almost feels like a party-style game, really, but with lots and lots of pieces on the table. So Camel Up is A tier. Right, number 15 on the list is Santorini. Now, Santorini is another abstract strategy game like Pylos and Quarto, but it's not like them at all in the way that it looks, okay, because it's full of plastic, and you're creating another cityscape. You're creating Santorini in front of you with these white buildings and these blue rooftops, and then the miniatures that move about and climb up to the different levels. I do like games that play with sort of 3-dimensional and different levels in relation to the scoring, and this is a good example of that. Lots of different powers that you can use to change up the gameplay. I think this is a good game. I bought it, I got rid of it. I wish I hadn't got rid of it. I would still like to own it, but it obviously didn't hold my attention all that much, so I'm calling this one a B tier, okay? Good, solid game, Santorini. Right, number 16, The Climbers. And this is another one which is very abstract and has height as part of well, it's the main thing in the game. You want to get higher than all the other players. But your playing piece can only move on the colours, on the blocks, the surfaces of the blocks that match the colour of your piece. And so you're rotating the blocks throughout the game, moving them to change this kind of, I don't know, what is it, a mountain or a tower, and you can use these little ladders to get up higher, but you want to get to the top to a position where the other players can't get any higher, and then you're holding that highest position. It's a good abstract game if you're playing with more than 2 players. Yeah, most abstract games work best with 2 players. This one works better with more, but it's not in the highest rung of those things, so I'm calling this one B tier. Yeah, it's a good game, The Climbers, but it's not one of the best. Right, number 17 is Colt Express. And this is another one where it's a really popular game, another Spiel des Jahres winner, but it's not one that I liked because of the programming. Again, like River Dragons, I just don't enjoy that mechanism where I lay out my plans and everybody else can wreck it. But Colt Express caught my eye like no other game. I remember being at Essenspiel and just being amazed by this 3-dimensional train laid out on the table, and the playing pieces running across the top of the train or inside the middle of the train, and they're shooting at each other and trying to grab each other's loot. And so it's a chaotic, very, very eye-catching game, but I didn't enjoy it, and so for me, it's a D tier. Okay, next up then is Tokyo Highway, number 18. So Tokyo Highway, I've got the 2-player version, the original Itten edition, although I think it came out later from Asmodee with a much bigger version. And this one, essentially, you're just stacking little discs and ice lolly sticks and placing those little cars on them with tweezers. It's sort of got a dexterity, well, a massive dexterity element to it, but it's also quite sort of tactical, really. I found this one really satisfying and enjoyable. And I think that the way it looks is just stunning. It does create this sort of almost slightly futuristic sort of picture of crisscrossing highways, like those really compact cities around the world. So stunning table presence from very simple components, and actually a really nice gameplay as well. I like Tokyo Highway a lot. I'm calling this one A tier. Right, number 19 is Origin. So Origin is another objective-based game like Takenoko and Ticket to Ride, where you're trying to complete different objectives. But the main pull for this game is the fact you've got all these brilliant wooden pawns of different colours, different thickness, different height, and as you sort of move from one part of the world to another, they kind of evolve. And so they might get a little bit thicker, or they might just change colour slightly, or they might get shorter or taller. And so the pieces sort of evolve as they move around the board. And you're trying to fulfill these objectives of getting different pieces into different places. It is really beautiful. The gameplay isn't quite as good. It's a little simplistic. It's not quite as good as the way the game looks. And so ultimately I found this game didn't have the staying power that I wanted from it. But it's by no means a bad game. It is fun. I'm going to call it, I want to call it a B, but I'm going to go with C. It's a C tier game. Okay, it's decent. I think you should give it a go, Origin, but it's not the best. Right, number 20, Tikal. So Tikal is a Wolfgang Kramer, Michael Kiesling game, another Spiel des Jahres winner, I believe. And this one had an old Rio Grande edition, which I had with nice cardboard pieces and stuff like that, but it wasn't beautiful. And then Super Meeple created one of the most beautiful productions I've ever seen, with these resin pieces that stack on top of each other to create these temples around this lovely forest. It's a fantastic game. Action points, lots of scope for analysis paralysis in this one, so pick your players carefully, but really good strategic area control type game. That's Tikal, and I'm calling that one, should we go S or should we go A? We'll go A tier. Okay, A tier for Tikal. Number 21 is Photosynthesis. So Photosynthesis from Blue Orange is one of the most inspiring games to me as a game designer. Okay, and yet I don't like the game. Okay, I just love the presentation of it. I want to create games that look like Photosynthesis. So simple, so effective, and you know, surely we can do more with these three-dimensional pieces without breaking the budget, because these are cardboard pieces, and yet it looks amazing. I found the gameplay to be, for me, it was a little more convoluted than I like from an abstract game. It was quite mean. I was expecting something more simple, a bit more, that horrible word, elegant, okay, than I got from Photosynthesis. But nonetheless, extremely popular game. Just happens for me that it's a D tier. Right, number 22, Rhino Hero Super Battle from Harbour. This is a game where you've got folded cards and you're stacking them on top of each other. Originally there was Rhino Hero, a small sort of one tower, and then you've got Super Battle where you've got several towers and they're joined by little bridging pieces, and then you're placing wooden pieces onto the cards, so the whole thing starts to sway because it's all very, very light. This is a game that's ostensibly aimed at children, but actually is really, really fun with a group of adults. I absolutely love Rhino Hero Super Battle. It's really funny. I love the payoff of stacking games when everything just falls apart and somebody just loses because the whole thing's just collapsed in a big pile. It's hilarious. This one for me is an A tier. Okay, Rhino Hero Super Battle. Number 23, Pyramid of Penqueen. So this one is from Brain Games. It's a re-release of an old game called Curse of the Mummy, completely reworked in terms of the art style. You've got a magnetic board that sits between the players. You've got a team of penguins that work together on one side of the board, and then you've got a mummy player who works alone on the other side of the board. And the treasure hunter, the penguins, they're moving their little magnets on their side of the board, but they can see where the mummy is, because when the mummy moves their little piece, the mummy magnet on the other side moves with it, almost by magic. When the pieces click together, when the mummy catches the people, so dramatic, because you're trying to sneak past that mummy, but then the mummy catches you. It's fantastic, and it just looks great, you know, this three-dimensional board, and it's a really good game. So this one I'm calling A tier for Pyramid of Penqueen. Right, number 24 on the list is Scythe. Now, Scythe is another one of those ones that maybe I'm making an exception here, because a lot of the visual appeal of Scythe is about those miniatures. But it's not just that, it's the epic scope of the board and the resources and the little meeples and those boards with the dual layers and the little dials that you turn. And, you know, the whole thing is just this big, beautiful production. And it's not even artwork that would particularly appeal to me usually. I took a long time before I played Scythe. I was put off by the mechs, where a lot of people were really drawn in by them. But nonetheless, it's a fantastic game and it does look beautiful. So for me, this is an A tier for Scythe. Where does that take us to? Gobblet. So Gobblet is another one of those coffee table style games. Wooden pieces, just looks like a lovely little object. The pieces stack over the other pieces. So again, we're trying to connect four, but your pieces get hidden and then you might move a piece and accidentally reveal one of your opponent's pieces. It's a really clever twist on the genre. Really good game. Probably not quite as good as Quarto. I'm going to call this one, it's an A tier. A tier, B tier. No, it's a B tier. We'll go B tier for Gobblet. B tier for Gobblet. Good game, really good game. Number 26, Tzolkin, the Mayan calendar. Now this one has these big plastic gears. It's quite a complex worker placement style game. I don't know whether it quite qualifies as worker placement. I'd have to get my head around that. But anyway, it's an action selection game. You place your pieces out, you rotate these gears, your pieces move, your workers move with the gears, and then when you remove it, you get the resource of the thing that you ended up on. Now it's been many years since I played this, but I did play it a number of times. I never picked up a copy, which suggests to me I didn't love it. But I think also it was partly because I knew a lot of people who owned it and it was a very popular game at the time. You don't see it around quite so much these days. I'd really like to get hold of a copy of this. I think, for now I'm going to call it a B tier, but I think it could rise if I played it a little bit more. Number 27, Potion Explosion. So this one has this amazing marble dispenser, and it's a twist on that sort of match 3 gameplay that you get in mobile phone games. You take a marble from the dispenser, the other marbles drop down, click together. If they match, then you might take more of those, and so you get these chain reactions. You then place the coloured marbles onto your potions, and when you complete a potion, because you've got the right coloured marbles on it, it gives you special powers. Frankly, it looks better than it is, okay? The gameplay is not quite as good as the central mechanism. It's a fun game, it is fun, but it's quite simplistic what's going on, and it feels like there should be a little bit more. It feels like that central marble dispenser is your main draw in this game. I would recommend it, Potion Explosion. It's a B tier game. Number 28, Shobu. So Shobu is another abstract strategy game. These ones do quite well on table presence, and I think that's because you need something. You haven't got a theme, so your table presence is the thing you're aiming for to draw players in. Shobu looks very natural. It reminds me of old, ancient games like Go and Mancala that can be played with pebbles, because that's what you've got in Shobu, is a bunch of pebbles and these little boards and a bit of rope. And you're moving pieces, that moves other corresponding pieces on other boards, a bit like we see in the recent game, That Time You Killed Me. And you're trying to push pieces off the board by the movement of your pebbles. Really good game, Shobu. I'm going to call this one A tier for Shobu. Next up then, number 29, Celestia. This is another one that I once owned, played a few times, got rid of. Really like that little cardboard airship in the middle. And I should love this game because I love push your luck games. It's one of my favourite genres. This one just didn't quite work for me. I always felt like I didn't quite know why I was making the decisions that I was making. Like, the decision space seemed very small. It just seemed like a guess. And I don't know, I'm probably being unfair. I never felt like I got my head around that game all that much. Certainly other players seemed to really enjoy it, and I liked it. But I like the appearance of it more than the gameplay. Again, I'm calling this one C tier. Okay, C tier for Celestia. Number 30 is Dimension. So this is a game from Cosmos where we're stacking little plastic balls of different colours and we're creating a pyramid. You lay out 6 cards, which give you different rules that you need to abide by when you're laying out your balls. And you're trying to complete that puzzle before the other player, so it's a race against the other players. I really, really like this, and it was part of a big inspiration for the game Quuzzle. But there were things in it which I felt like I needed to kind of fix, really. I don't like the scoring in Dimension. A lot of negative scoring, and then there's that thing where the cards that are laid out, you can't necessarily complete them all, but then there's this bonus you're aiming for, but you can't get that bonus because you can't complete all the cards. So it's not a perfect design from my personal perspective, but I do really, really like it, and the way it looks is fantastic. So I'm calling this one B tier, okay? B tier for Dimension. Number 31, Kipp Mir Saures. So this is a recent Zoc Verlag release. I talked about this in my recent video. Got these teetering sort of towers. You put dice into them. They might tip over and spill out the dice, and then you're drafting those dice for set collection purposes. Again, it's another one where the device itself is probably more interesting than the game. The game is good. Okay, it's a simple, fun game, really good for families, very few rules. But it's not exceptional, okay? Whereas the device is fantastic. It was a bit of a pain to put this one together, and putting it back in the box, you've got to take it apart a little bit and then put it back together next time, which is always a little bit of a pain. So this is sort of mid-range, really. I would call this one a B tier, okay? B tier for Kipp Mir Saures. Next one up is Cuzco, which is a game closely related to the game Tikal, so by the same designers, same publisher, with area control again. It used to be called Java, this game, in its original edition. You're building up a sort of landscape. I really like that we're stacking these hexes on top of each other, and we're creating hills and valleys. And like I've mentioned with Santorini before, you're benefiting by getting into the higher levels. And I really like that. Being up on the hill gives you more points than being down in the valleys. Looks stunning. It's actually my favourite of the Mask trilogy, so I like this more than Tikal. I'm going to call this one, let's go S tier. S tier for Cuzco. I really, really love it. It's been a favourite of mine for a long time. Number 33. I'm almost scared to say this, but I don't really like Azul very much. Okay, Azul is such a popular game, such a massive seller. And it's okay. It's okay. I don't mind it. I'd happily play it. It feels to me like a roll and write. Okay, that's what it feels like. It feels like it should be a roll and write, but instead it's got all these beautiful pieces, and they are lovely. But it's all just a bit big and bulky, and I found the gameplay is not quite as, I don't know. I don't even understand why I don't like Azul all that much. I've never played any of the sort of other versions of it, and maybe that would improve it for me. I don't know. I like the central sort of drafting. I like the pieces. Just feels a little insubstantial for me, Azul. So that one is going down as a C tier for Azul. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, next up, number 34, Cloud City. So Cloud City is a blue-orange game from Phil Walker Harding. I think it's flown under the radar a little bit. This is another one of those ones where we're building a cityscape, a bit like Tokyo Highway. We're creating these towers, and they've got little walkways along them. I suppose they're supposed to be skyscrapers coming up above the clouds. But really, it's an abstract game, very, very simple, trying to complete objectives and score points by having the longest walkways between your towers. And it's just got a really great visual sort of appearance once you've finished the game. I really enjoyed it, Cloud City, so I'm going to call that one a B. It's a B tier, Cloud City. And next on the list is Wingspan, and there's not much more to say about this game than I've already said about it before. I love the bird box dice tower, I love the beautiful little eggs, I love the images on the cards, everything about it just looks stunning. I've got all these upgraded little resource pieces, which I know don't come with the basic game, but even the basic game as it comes is a really, really attractive one, and it really helps that, of course, it's a fantastic game. It's not as accessible as people make out, okay? There's millions of people buying this game who I'm sure are quite confused by it because there's some sort of sophisticated gameplay going on here. You know, it's got a sizable rule book, lots of engine building and tableau building and all that sort of stuff that's familiar to gamers, but not necessarily familiar to everybody else. But for me, this is an S-tier game. Number 36, Niagara. This is a Spiel des Jahres winner again, with a fantastic table presence. This one's got, the box has a river running across the top of it, and then a waterfall at the end of the box, and the river is represented by these translucent plastic discs, and they move, you know, you push them, and so they move all the other translucent discs, and sometimes they'll fall off the end, representing the water going over the waterfall. But your boats sit on top of these plastic discs, so when the discs are pushed, the boats go with them, and it's a really great mechanism. I didn't get on with the game all that much. I didn't like the end game. I found that it dragged on because players would keep on stealing pieces from each other that just kept delaying the ending of the game. And so by the end of it, I was totally unengaged. So I think with some tweaks, this could be a game that really, really worked for me. Maybe some house rules, I don't know. But as it is, it's a game that I owned and I got rid of eventually. I'm calling this one C tier. C tier for Niagara. Okay, number 37, Agricola. I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't agree with me putting Agricola on a game, on a list of table presence games, but for me it's exactly what I want. I want to be building something out in front of me, like those cityscapes, but in this case I'm building a farm. I've got all my little animals and my fences and my stables. It's just my little thing, and I'm just building it out. Very satisfying to create something three-dimensionally in front of me. And I have got upgraded pieces, but I believe the more recent editions of Agricola have upgraded pieces in them anyway. I think it looks stunning, and it's a fantastic game at the centre of it. Absolutely brilliant strategic game, quite complex game if you haven't played it before. Worker placement, and for me it's an S tier. Okay, absolutely top run game, this one. Right, number 38, Strand Unter, another game from Zoc Verlag. You'll see these Zoc Verlag excel in games with table presence. This one you've got a beach and you've got the sea is gradually coming out initially and it's revealing shells, and you want to gather these shells of different colours to build sandcastles. You put the sandcastles onto the beach and you score more points if they're close to the sea. But the trouble is, the closer you get to the sea, the more likely they are to be washed away when the sea starts to come back in towards the end of the game. So there's a really nice push your luck element to it. It's a satisfying, fun game, this one. I really liked it. Good one for families, but it's got a little bit going on there that you could play it with a bunch of adults too. So this one I'm going to call B tier. B tier for Strand Unter. Number 39 is Bandu, also known as Bauzac. This is also from Zoc Verlag Games, very similar to Junkart, this one. Although I've got more nostalgia for Bandu. I played Bandu for a long time before I ever got Junkart, and so then when I played Junkart, I was a little bit, it's very similar to Bandu, and I love Bandu. And so I've never quite got on board with the whole Junkart thing. I still would probably gravitate towards Bandu. Bandu is probably cheaper to get hold of as well. And it's just got fantastic chunky wooden pieces. Everything I said about Junkart also applies to Bandu. It hasn't got quite as much variety in there as Junkart because it doesn't have all those different rule sets. But nonetheless, Bandu I'm calling it an S tier. I absolutely love Bandu. I absolutely love it. It's one of my favourites. Right, number 40, another S tier. This is Ticket to Ride, but it's the anniversary editions. Ticket to Ride alone is very attractive, but it wouldn't make a list about table presence. But those anniversary editions, the 10th anniversary edition and then the 15th anniversary for Europe, just have amazing plastic trains in them which are painted and moulded in lovely ways, and they've got those tins, and the whole thing just looks stunning. It's bigger and brighter. It just looks amazing, and it's a fantastic game. S tier game, Ticket to Ride. Number 41, Tiny Towns from AEG. This is another one where they've tried to create this little cityscape, okay, or a town in this case, tiny town, and it works, okay? You've got these different buildings, and so you lay them out and you create something that looks quite nice. The problem is it is a bit small. It's not as impressive visually as something like Medina. But the gameplay is really good. It's essentially similar to a polyomino game, really. You're trying to create a sort of Tetris-shaped pattern of different coloured pieces in order to then build buildings that represent those pieces, and so your sort of town grows throughout the game. Really satisfying game, Tiny Towns. I really like it. B tier for Tiny Towns. Number 42, Histrio. This is a game from Bruno Catala and somebody else. I can't remember the other designer's name. It's on the list because it's got this cardboard theatre that sits at the centre of it, and you've got this rotating piece which indicates whether you're creating a comedy play or a tragedy play. And then you've got really nice plastic pieces in there as well, and lovely artwork. Now the game isn't as good as the way it all looks. Okay, it's a simultaneous action selection game. It's all right. Okay, it's okay. It's fun. Okay, I enjoyed it. I think I even put it on my top 10 of the year that it came out. But it didn't have much staying power, and it didn't stay in my collection. So I'm going to call this one a C tier for Histrio. But it is beautiful. Number 43 is Cathedral. This is an older game from Mattel. It's essentially a very simple polyomino game. It's an abstract game where you're trying to fill out the grid and block off the other player from being able to place their pieces. So you want to get more of your pieces on the board than they're able to get on the board. Similar to something like Blokus, really, very similar. But it's got these amazing sculpted plastic pieces that means that it really does feel like you're creating this city full of these buildings as you're playing the game. I would call this one A tier. Okay, A tier for Cathedral. Next up on the list, where are we? 44, Planet. Okay, Planet is another blue-orange game. This one with a I don't know what you'd call this shape. It's a three-dimensional geometric shape that you can rotate and click pieces onto the sides of it of different types of terrain. So you're creating a globe, a planet, and you're trying to fulfill objectives that are laid out on the table. I was really looking forward to this because it looked so beautiful, but actually I found it very simplistic and a little bit boring. Again, I know it's a really popular game and there was nothing wrong with it at all. I would recommend it if you're looking for something really, really light and simple, but it didn't hold my attention. I didn't hang on to this game for very long. So I'm calling this one a C tier. Okay, I've got nothing against it, but I've got nothing hugely positive to say about it either. Number 45, Mexica. It's one of the games in the trilogy of mask games. So Tikal, Cuzco, and Mexica. And Mexica is my least favourite of them, but it's still stunning with those resin pieces. This is quite a mean area control game. We've seen quite a lot of those on this list, haven't we? I'm calling this one B tier. B tier game, Mexica. Number 46, Bucket King 3D. So Bucket King 3D is a trick-taking game, but a very simple, very chaotic one. And you've got these plastic buckets sort of in a pyramid that sit in front of you. And when you play certain cards, you get to take buckets away from your opponent's pyramid. And that, of course, might mean that the buckets on the higher levels also come off as well. And so it's a real take that game, very chaotic, very chance driven, but it's got this amazing, I love this, the Jolly Thinkers sort of graphic style of these pigs and dogs and lions and polar bears all sort of battling each other. Yeah, really silly, chaotic fun, right up my street, this sort of game. So I'm going to call this one, well, it's not great. I can't call it a great game. Let's go B tier. B tier for Bucket King 3D. Okay. Number 47, New York Zoo. So this is a Uwe Rosenberg polyomino game, and when you lay the polyominoes, you might get to place animals on them, little animal wooden pieces, animal meeples. And so they're going to be flamingos and penguins and foxes, and I think kangaroos, and it just looks gorgeous. It's just lovely the way that these pieces look. As a game, I would rather play Bear and Park, I'd rather play Patchwork, I'd rather play Cottage Garden, I'd rather play Isle of Cats, you know, so it is not my favourite polyomino game. I found the rules a little bit convoluted, a few too many exceptions and things like that, and I don't like the race ending. That's my own personal taste. I don't like games that end in a race like that, strategic games. I've talked about this in previous videos. So New York Zoo didn't quite do it for me, but again, I can't say anything too bad about it. It's a decent game. I'm calling this one C tier. Okay, C tier for New York Zoo. Number 48, Pika Mouse. This is a children's game from Gezanke, where the box is sort of a house, and then you've got this little light that you put in the top of the box and you click it on and it just stays on for 30 seconds and it goes out. And during that 30 seconds, you're going to be looking through the windows of the box and trying to see the pieces inside and remember where they are. Because when the light goes out, you're going to have to say which piece was in which room. It's not a game for adults to play together, you know, it would get pretty boring and it would get pretty easy as well. But when you're playing it with children, I think it's a fantastic memory game with beautiful production. So for children, I would say this was an A tier game. Okay, for adults, well, I wouldn't even rank it. I mean, I wouldn't play it with adults. But with children, A tier for Pika Mouse. Number 49, Arkadia. This is an old Ravensburger game by Rudiger Dorn, and I can't believe this hasn't had a reprint, okay? I keep on saying this. It's such a good game with brilliant table presence. Polyominoes you're laying out, and then you're surrounding them with these little plastic meeples, and then you take control of them, which gives you these seals of different colours. And these seals have a value to them that is dictated by the colours showing on the top of this central castle. And you can add pieces to this castle to change the value of the different seals throughout the game. So it's got a stock holding element to it. Everyone's got these nice colourful player shields that sit in front of them to hide the seals that they've got. It's really satisfying, nice and simple and slick design, but with great presence. Highly recommended. I'm calling this one S tier. And you know, the biggest, most overlooked game on this list, I would say. Number 50, Ice Cool. So this is the last one we're talking about. This is from Brain Games. It's got that fantastic thing of a box within a box. So you're taking the boxes out, they stack inside each other, you lay them out to create your big sort of playing area, and then you're flicking these penguins to flick them through the doors to get the fish, which are going to score you points. But one player is playing as the hall monitor. They're flicking their penguin to try and make contact with the other penguins. The penguins rock back and forth. You can never knock them over. That's a fantastic playing piece. The whole thing just looks incredible and huge. And you can connect Ice Cool 1 and Ice Cool 2 together to make it even bigger. It's very impressive looking. The game itself is great, really fun flicking game. So I'm going to call this one, I think it's an A tier. Okay, it won the Kinderspiel des Jahres, so it's a great game for children, but I think adults can play this too. It's a very skillful game actually. So I really like Ice Cool. Let's call that one A tier. And so that concludes my list. And I know that there are some that I've missed out that probably really ought to be on here. Because I haven't played them, basically. I haven't played Cleopatra and the Society of Architects. I haven't played Rescue Polar Bears. I think these would probably be on the list if I'd played them. I've left off Star Wars Rebellion, that I know a lot of people would put on here. For me, I went along the lines of, well, that's more about the miniatures, and I don't really like the... I don't know, there's just so much stuff. And maybe I'm being contradictory there because I did put Scythe on there. So I'll acknowledge it's a good looking game. What else? I haven't included games like Cash and Guns or Rock, Paper, Wizard, which certainly draw the attention of other players because people are pointing at each other and doing these hand gestures or got these polystyrene guns. But it feels to me like it's the players that are drawing the attention rather than the actual game itself. And so they didn't make the list either. So lots of unfair stuff on this list, and I'll be back next time to doing something a little bit more serious. But I hope you enjoyed this light-hearted look at 50 games that I enjoy or don't enjoy. Anyway, join me next time, and please subscribe to the channel. Let me know what you think are great games with great table presence. Let me know where I'm wrong, let me know where I'm right, and I'll see you next time. All the best.